Hello and welcome. My name is Jennifer Schaffel, and I'm the chairperson for the West Windsor Human Relations Council. Thank you for joining us for a special program sponsored by the West Windsor Human Relations Council in observance and celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King Day, 2022. In honor of Dr. King and his life's work of driving toward the ideals of love and equality for all people, our main themes for this year's panel discussion are community involvement and creating an inclusive community. In Dr. King's own words, an individual has not started living until he can rise above narrow confines of his individualistic concerns to the broader concerns of all humanity. We are very excited to have a wonderful panel comprised of individuals who are not only accomplished, but also are dedicated to serving and building community right here in West Windsor and the Princeton area. Before we begin, I would like to thank and recognize the rest of the members of the West Windsor Human Relations Council. Yanmei Wang, Melissa Hager, Ephraim Bukes, Jyotima Prasad, Mark Pepper, and our student members, Siddharth Satish, Henry Xiao, and Akshat Agarwal. I'd also like to thank outgoing township liaison, Sonia Gallus, and incoming liaison, Martin Whitfield. And with that, I would like to introduce Sid Satish, one of our student members, who will be the moderator for the panel. Sid, take it away.
Thank you so much, Jen. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our panel. As Jen mentioned, we're so excited to discuss a lot of the pressing issues as well as the legacy of Martin Luther King today. So without further ado, I will begin asking a couple of questions to the panelists. And our first question will go to Ms. Joanne Sherry. For a bit of background, Ms. Joanne Sherry is the current social services coordinator and property manager at Freedom Village of West Windsor. She has worked with Project Freedom since 2013, starting at the Lawrenceville corporate offices. In 2019, she was tasked with opening the property in West Windsor. This property provides housing for both disabled and affordable housing tenants, which differs from the original properties which focused on housing for disabled tenants only. Thank you so much, Ms. Sherry, for joining us. Your question is, Albert Einstein said, "The world is a dangerous place, not because of those that do evil, but because of those who look on and do nothing." Can you tell me a little bit about your work and what Albert Einstein's statement means to you and the research or work you are doing?
Yes, thank you, Sid. In my years at working at Project Freedom was initially started to focus only on the disabled. So in other words, somebody who was in a wheelchair or perhaps unable to live outside of a rehab or a nursing home, or perhaps had some intellectual disabilities. Project Freedom built solely to support people that were very disabled, and all of our apartments are wheelchair accessible. And over time, so we served, we provided a service to part of the population that was very much neglected. And over the 31 years that Project Freedom has been in existence, we've been able to expand that vision outside of the disabled population to all low-income and affordable housing as well. So where our focus remains with the disabled, we have opened our vision to include another segment of the population that is not often included in our everyday communities.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. I think it's really important to expand our communities of outreach and also the people that we reach out to. And I think this example proves exactly that. I think I'm going to pose the same question to Dr. Ying Liu. And before I do, I want to give a brief introduction to Dr. Ying Liu, who is a PhD who has a PhD in public policy and statistics and is an associate professor, director of education studies at NYU Steinhardt School of Culture, Education, and Human Development. Her research focuses on access and equity in education and research methodology in social and behavioral sciences. She lives in Princeton, New Jersey, and is a mother of two, a 7th grader and a 2nd grader. She's an active community member, and among many community engagements she has been doing, she's a proud board member of Make Us Visible NJ, a grassroots organization that focuses on inclusive teaching of AAPI history and contributions in NJ K-12 classrooms. Through the work and the strong advocacy of MUVNJ, now NJ State is poised to pass new laws to mandate the teaching of AAPI history. She's also the co-president of Princeton Middle School PTSO. Welcome, Dr. Liu, and the question as well as the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sid, for your introduction. And since you posed the question, I'm just going to answer your question. When I look at Albert Einstein's saying, right, I'm actually thinking about 2 layers of saying. First of all, I think it's about when we say, right, it's basically don't be a bystander, right? When you say if the word is when you see what makes the world an evil place is not because you don't do evil, and it's also because you don't look, you only be a bystander. And I think this is kind of important, as a lot of people may say, well, you know, I don't think I feel strong enough, or I'm in the position to directly encounter people who are bullying, or people who are doing things like racially motivated violence and brutality, right? But I think there's also an important thing, as everybody should realize, they have the power to speak up. Right? You may not be able to directly encounter at the time, let's say in a physical way, for example, but there's always ways you can speak up. And as a matter of fact, just very recently, there's this news about a very famous, prominent UPenn law professor, Amy Wax. And the news about her became viral because she said something openly racist about actually Asian Americans in the interview. And she basically said Asian Americans don't belong to this country because they don't understand the spirit of American democracy and civil liberty. So, you know, and then I started seeing a lot of people start to speak up, a voice on social media and petitions and asking UPenn to fire her. Although as a very famous professor, right, I think we don't know whether this will actually lead to a termination of her job. But just being able to, so many people speak out, I think it will definitely change the environment. And because I'm an academician, and I love to see voices coming from community, people respond to things like that, right? So I think that's important. And secondly, I also want to point out the thing about when we think about do evil, right? Most people immediately think about, oh, you know, it's physical abuse, right? Brutality, violence. But as a matter of fact, the right and wrong is never occupying two. It's a continuum. As a matter of fact, in our daily life, day-to-day life, we may or may not be realizing we're contributing to biases without realizing, by subscribing to a biased system, right? Or even the systemic racist system. So one of the things I actually want to share with you, because the question is asking about my research, right? I want to share with you, my field of work is in social statistics, basically, using statistics to study social and behavior phenomena, etc. And you know, variables such as race, ethnicity, gender, age are like bread and butter components in our work. But several years ago, I started looking at the history of social statistics, and you realize the very concepts of using concepts of race, right, started early on by those very prominent statisticians such as Francis Galton and Fisher and Pearson, because they started using these concepts in order to establish that the people of British or England or European origins are better than other races. Right. So for me, it was like a very important revelation, because in the past, I was like, oh, my method is correct, so I'm going to report, you know, there's a gap here, there's a gap there, right? But now once you understand how people might take this message and use it differently, so I became a lot more aware of my work and in terms of the consequences of my work. Even, you know, I could ensure within a mathematical framework I'm doing things right, but still there's a piece about, you know, less obvious, right? About this do no evil. I think that's something everybody can all think about, right? When we think we're trying to be a good citizen, but accidentally, if you're subscribing to a biased system, you may still be contributing to reinforcing the biases and stereotypes.
A wonderful response, Dr. Liu. I think it's important to focus on a little bit of reflection as well as realizing that I think what stood out was good and bad is not really black and white necessarily. It's really a spectrum that things can fall on. And I think that's something important for people to realize as they evaluate the consequences of their actions and as well as the intent and impact of their actions. So thank you so much for that, Dr. Liu. So we will now be moving on to a second question that I will be posing to Mr. Sajid Syed. Mr. Syed, with a master's in specializing in pharmaceutical marketing, is coming from a background with a registered pharmacist background and is the chairman of Princeton Stonehouse Capital. An industry entrepreneur, he has built a career around successfully launching and selling pharmaceutical companies. Mr. Syed is very actively involved in civic activities and serves on numerous nonprofit boards, including the Muslim Center of Greater Princeton and Trenton Area Soup Kitchen. He is also the founder and president of the Medina Community Clinic. He has previously served on the boards of Greater Philadelphia Health Action, National Association of Specialty Pharmacies, and the Mercer Alliance to End Homelessness. He's a registered pharmacist and holds an MS specializing in pharmaceutical marketing from St. John's University. Mr. Syed is married to Simin Syed, who practiced immigration law in New York City for over 25 years and is now retired and involved in many social work activities. And their son, Dr. Zahid Syed, is currently doing his psychiatry residency at Jefferson University Hospital in Philadelphia. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Syed. And the question for you is, from your perspective, what keeps communities from listening to or truly hearing what others experience? Is it defensiveness, time, or privilege?
Thanks, Sid. You're such a charming young person. I'm very impressed, must say. And thank you for the previous panelists for their, so I think this kind of rolls over into what Dr. Liu said earlier, because, when people, when the world becomes a more dangerous place, and if good people stay quiet, then the world becomes a more dangerous place. And a lot of times, very often people don't realize that even though they may be wrong, they're just their own inherent biases may be a reflection of that. So to expand this further, to answer your question, really, it's really two things in my mind. It's exposure, what kind of exposure you had, and proximity. These are two single points that I can think of. Exposure, if you've always lived in a very protected environment and have never been exposed to other cultures, other communities, other faiths, other religions, then you're going to be inherently biased against others, because you hate people you don't know. Once you know people, you tend to love them. And you very often, I can see this even on the media, you'll see some far-flung land in trouble, it just comes off kind of, in a passing moment, you don't think about it. But if something's close to you, or you know somebody that's going through a similar challenge, then you tend to help. So in our instance, I know we live very comfortable lives here in the West Windsor area, but just 9 miles south of us is a teeming city of Trenton, where life is very difficult. You just have to drive by any afternoon, because in the evenings it's very dangerous. You can't even drive by there. And it's almost, I would say, diametrically opposite to our lives over here. And it's literally, like I said, 9 miles down the road from us. So that's one thing I talked about is exposure. And then the second thing is proximity, because if you're close to somebody you will feel for them. But if you're not close to somebody, then it's human nature not to feel for them. Um, so I think that's what I'd like to speak about on just getting yourself exposed and more in tune with other cultures, other faiths, other kind of people. The other. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sayed. And I think that's very important and very telling of how humans respond to different types of stimulus. We're less likely to respond to numbers, just plain numbers, over stories of people, as well as their histories and people especially we're close to. So I think that's a very, very telling narrative. I will now go on to our third question of this afternoon, which is going to be posed to Christopher A. Edwards. And before I do that question, I want to give a little bit of background on Christopher Edwards, who's the executive assistant for the Attorney General. He advises the acting Attorney General on significant litigation matters and serves as the acting Attorney General's primary point of contact for the Division of Law. Chris is an experienced trial attorney with civil and criminal litigation experience in both public and private sectors. He also serves on the National Institute of Trial Advocacy's faculty. Prior to joining the Office of the Attorney General, Chris served as an Assistant Attorney General, Assistant Chief, and a Deputy Attorney General in the Department of Law's Financial Affairs Practice Group. Before joining the Department of Law in 2009, Chris spent a decade in private practice in New York as well as Boston. During his time in Massachusetts, Chris served as a special assistant district attorney in Suffolk County, Boston, and was voted a Massachusetts Rising Star Super Lawyer. Chris is a graduate of Pace University as well as Harvard Law School. Thank you so much for joining us, Attorney Edwards. So the question for you is, so that we do not wallow in the valley of despair, as MLK wrote, what is the first step or steps you would take to support the work of communities that would help to build bridges when trying to be inclusive?
All right, well, thank you very much. Obviously, my bio is way too long, so I apologize for that. But I would like to pick up on something that Syed said. I work in Trenton. So I see the differences between Trenton and West Windsor. I've evolved over a long period of time thinking about Martin Luther King, and I think we just have to see each other as more alike than separate. And I think it's just that simple. I've come to that point. You build communities by connecting to people who are different than you, but we're all human. Particularly in places like West Windsor, we all want our kids to do well. We all care about our community, and I think it's building those bridges. You can do the same thing in Trenton as well, and I think that unfortunately, sometimes there are too many barriers, and we use barriers to stay disconnected. And I think once we take those barriers down, then we can just be the people who we are. And you're a mother, you're a father, you're a son. It's all about being connected. And again, we're really all a part of the human race. When you look at it that way, right? They used to say, maybe I'm dating myself, we all put our pants on the same way, but we do, and that's connection. I think that's what Dr. King was talking about with the love. It took me a long time to really understand that, but I think I get it. You judge someone by their character, right? Character is, take away the ethnicity, take away the race, their character, right? That's how we judge people, and that's how we should judge each other. If you're decent and kind and community oriented, then that should be the standard. And I think that's the way you build community, because you build it with trust, right? And then the thing, we all have circles of trust, and it's just expanding that circle to include other people. So that's what I would say. Thank you.
A wonderful response. Thank you so much. And while we have you on the floor, I'd like to pose a second question to you as well, which is, what is your dream of what an inclusive community or country would look like, or how it would function? How can we break down the silos that exist between different groups within our own country?
So, I have to say this. I am the executive assistant attorney general for New Jersey. The opinions I express are my own. So I have to say that. So, okay, I got that out of the way. I would go on to my first point. Like, drop the barriers. We're all a part of the human race. How do you break down the silo? Hard to do it in COVID times. Get to know people. Meet them where they're at, right? Walking around Princeton is different than walking around Trenton. But the people in Trenton still have value. And they are in a silo. Meet them at their silo. I think the great thing about the US, and I'll say it, is it, at least how it used to be anyway, is you can go as far and be who you are. You can create who you are. Like, my father was an immigrant. That's the great thing, right, about the country. And I think for me, breaking down the silos is allowing everyone the opportunity to be who they are, to achieve the best they can achieve, whatever that is. Doesn't always have to be academic, but to be the best that they can be. And I think if you allow people to be the best they can be, and you take down the barriers, and everyone could see each other as human beings, I think that's when you get there. Sorry, that's a little esoteric, but I think that's how you do it. Give people the education and opportunities. I know you have to give folks education and opportunities, but if we could just see each other as people, I think that is so much of the key. We're all the same.
I think that's perfect, because it's not just something, that only a specialized group of people are able to comprehend. It's very easy for anyone, regardless of their background and understanding, to realize. So thank you so much for that response.
Sid,
Mr. Syed, go ahead.
Sure. I just want to, great response, Chris. Thank you. I just want to chime in here that, yeah, so talent, talent is universal, right? Every soul is talented in some way or form. The difference is everybody doesn't have the opportunity. So that's what Chris is talking about is, some of us are fortunate to have the opportunity, but for those who don't get the opportunity, if they are given the opportunity, they're talented people. It's not like one race or one group of people is more talented than the rest. That's simply not the case. So I think that's what we're all trying to do is help others who don't have that opportunity. And, to quote the great Muhammad Ali, who said that, doing service to others is like the rent you pay on this earth to live on this earth. So that's it. Thanks.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that flows kind of perfectly into the next question I was going to ask Dr. Liu. And Dr. Liu, I guess the question for you is, how do we make all humans equal? It's quite existentialist as well as like a very difficult question. But I guess to boil it down a little bit more simply, should we strive for equity or equality? And are the two terms really mutually even exclusive?
Well, thank you, Sid. And I really appreciate and very much enjoyed all the panelists come. And I think, to be honest, I felt like Chris already, what he said actually already, and this what Syed add to it already, that captured the essence of the answer to this question. And I think it's really the core of this, right? Whether, let's set aside of equality versus equity, that's more of a definitional question, right? As an academician, I can give you definitions and I can tell you rigorously how one is different from the other. But to the core of this question is really, I think it's empathy and respect. We got to see each other as real human, right? If you can't do that, everything else, it's about just, I'm also I'm a Taoist. So to me, the Tao, the way it is really most important. It's not about, if you lose the Tao, right? Taoist people say, if you lose the Tao, then you need morality, moral, then you need the law, etc., etc. But let's just return to the Tao. We see each other as people. Then, my answer, before I see all these inspirational answers, right? My answer to your question was, I wanted to start using what a lot of people think it's hard to grasp the concept of, why equality is different from equity, right? And also equality is really not a thing. I just want to say I'm a mother of 2 kids, a boy and a girl, 12-year-old and a 7-year-old. If you ask me, any parent here, right, how do you make things equal to your kids? Right? They're different age, they have different needs, different interests, right? Am I going to buy them identical toys? Am I going to spend equal amount of time or equal amount of money? No, right? If you do that, they're like, no, we don't think we're being treated equally, right? But naturally, if you want to be a good parent, you're taking an equitable approach by looking at, right, where they are, what they need. Then you may scaffold them differently, maybe one for one kid a little bit more at a time, the other one differently, right? I think when people start understanding this is what really it's about, that's empathy, right? When you think about for me as a teacher, when I look at my students of different background, the first thing I think about is actually, how do I want to treat my children, right? And how do I see, if I can't see my kids as a whole person, right? And I can't treat them well, the same thing extend to my students. So in the sense, once you see this, right, the concept of equity is actually pretty simple. By definition, equity means we want to level the playing field for all students, because for obvious reasons, right, with the historical and still, unfortunately, the current existing systematic racism. And if you actually look at students, their own background, right, varies greatly. As an education a researcher, we know important predictors such as parental education, right, and the family income and neighborhood factors, right? All of this has all the historical reasons. Not every student is on the same same level playground, right? So in that sense, it makes perfect sense to do it, right? To provide using equitable approach. So, including access, providing equal access by right, offering different ways. And another thing I want to also say is, empathy is definitely very, very important. It's that human connection, because oftentimes, too often, even back to also the first question, right, as how do you not to do less evil, right, is even when you try to make things good, if you lose that human factor, you're not necessarily doing things good. So another concept I want to bring up here is respect. I live in Princeton. Princeton is a very progressive town, right? And we have our own issues as well. Princeton is not Trenton. I know it so well, and not West Windsor. Every town has different characteristics. But when people want to do good, if you don't respect at the very basic level, we're all human beings, you don't always get the best outcomes. I mean, in terms of Princeton School District, we're one of the best districts, like West Windsor, right? But our free reduced lunch student graduation rate, right, and our Hispanic student graduation rates are much lower than the state level peer-wise, right? Then you ask, right, so you try to do a lot of things thinking the Princeton BOE is big on equity, right? But if you don't actually think about who your student bodies are, serving them, you're not going to end up getting the best outcome. So I think empathy and the respect are two very, very important concepts in this, because otherwise, even you want to do good, you're not coming from a respect for respecting a point, a perspective, right? It may still not end up to an ideal outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for the beautiful way you explained both of them as it connects to your personal faith and the Tao, the ethical or moral kind of way of life. I think that's very, very unique to consider those two aspects as intermingled and very aptly explained. So thank you so much, Dr. Liu. I'm going to go back to Mr. Syed to ask one more question for you on where you find your inspiration for the community work that you do.
So, Sid, thanks for the question. So, it starts from yourself, for myself, for my faith, for my inner faith that I believe in, for my family, for my upbringing, for my neighborhood, from the town that I live in, everybody, all of you that I see around. But, I just quoted earlier Muhammad Ali. So that's, of the peers that are out there. Growing up, I grew up in India, in Bombay, and grew up in a very multicultural society, visited temples, mosques, churches all the time. So again, that's the exposure part, what I talked about. But really, it stems from, when you see other people doing good. I think what Dr. Liu just said earlier, it kind of good begets good and evil begets evil. So an example I will give you is, when somebody else is doing good, I feel like, also doing a similar thing, and I'm sure there are others who follow. A great example, in my bio you mentioned, and again, I apologize for the long bio, but one of the things that we started was, two things I'll mention real quick is, one, we started a clinic, a free clinic for patients in the Trenton area called the Medina Clinic. And I am just one of basically the clerks that help it. I'm not a physician, but I knew a lot of physicians in the area who wanted to give back their time. So these were people who wanted to do good, but all we did is basically enabled it. We were just enablers of helping. And we started off with 6 specialty physicians, and now we have 38 physicians who basically provide free specialty care in their own offices to do that. And so that's a great example of, people doing good. Everybody wants to do good, but if they see somebody else doing it, people will follow. Thank you.
That's awesome. And I think, the connections you bring in with peers, as well as the background that we grow up in, is particularly important. And I mean, we all draw sources of inspiration from different places. And I know, Ms. Sherry, you spoke a little bit about your inspiration and how it comes from different sources. So to you, what was the most inspirational movie, book, or event you experienced during the last year? And how or why was that inspirational, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, thanks. It's a great question, Sid. One of the books that I've been reading is The Sum of Us. And I don't know if other people have heard about this book, but it's been very, very eye-opening as far as a historical standpoint about, like, she uses wonderful imagery and examples, such as, the mortgage scams that were going on in 2008. That it was orchestrated, and people worked to grift basically money, and they targeted, and it wasn't always people of color. It was people that were less than. And if we were able to as the other panelists have said, look at each other as human beings, hear each other, have empathy for each other, and come from the same place. And that's really what I get from her book. We have to listen to each other, really pay attention, and we would really be able to solve a lot of our problems as far as hunger in this country, as far as equity within wealth. So that's really been a great book for me this year. So thank you. It's a wonderful question, Sid. Thank you.
Of course. And I'm thoroughly just so flattered by everyone here, and thank you so much for sharing your stage with me, allowing me to ask you questions, responding. And I just want to give Jen, as well as the rest of the HRC, a big thank you for this opportunity as well. And I'll pass it back over to you, Jen, for closing remarks.
Great, thank you, Sid. So in wrapping up, I'd like to say thank you so much again to our amazing panel for sharing your ideas and for inspiring all of us to take steps to be part, of making our communities more loving and inclusive. And thank you, Sid, for being a great moderator. Really helped tie everything together. Just wonderful. We hope everyone enjoyed the discussion and that you all have been encouraged to carry on the legacy of Dr. King by serving your communities, listening to others' perspectives, challenging yourself to do your part to build inclusivity and treating everyone with empathy and respect. Now, before everyone signs off, we have a special treat to end our program. Rather than my leaving you with another Dr. King quote, we have the honor of having the West Windsor Township Council and Mayor reading excerpts from Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech. Thank you again for watching.
Here are some excerpts from the I Have a Dream speech
by the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. at the March on Washington in 1963.
50 years ago, a great American whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment.
We must not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. We cannot walk alone. And as we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back. There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of unspeakable horrors of police brutality. We can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with the fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of the highways and the hotels of the cities. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro's basic mobility is from a smaller ghetto to a larger one. We can never be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their selfhood and robbed of their dignity by signs stating for whites only. We cannot be satisfied as long as a Negro in New York believes he has nothing for which to vote. No, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream.
Let us not wallow in the valley of despair. I say to you today, my friends, so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice.
I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day, down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day, right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, every hill and mountain shall be made low, the rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is the faith I go back to the South with.
With this faith, we'll be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty. Of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. So let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York.
Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And when this happens, and when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.